Hello. Uh, yeah. I guess it's been a while between the last video on networking and TCP and HTTP and how HTTP works and how do you secure like your application over the internet. Yeah, I've been quite busy. I guess. I've been playing squash recently. It's been fun. Also, who's watching the Euros? I don't know. Wanted Spain versus Germany in the final, but they were on the same side of the draw, so one of them had to leave the tournament early. Anyway, that aside, what have I been doing? Work. And recently, I went back to studying. So, HTML it is. Today, we will be going through learning the basics and writing semantic HTML. Now, the truth is, as far as HTML goes, there isn't much to learn or do or talk about per se, as opposed to other parts of the web or front end. That being said, it is one of the three core technologies that powers the internet. So that's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the three core technologies that power the internet on a very fundamental level. What is HTML? I think is a big question. I downloaded a notepad and I got a tablet. So just to make this easier for myself, right? And I probably will just be taking notes on this, and who knows? I might create like a Google Docs folder and just upload the notepad to just share to everybody. But this is primarily for me. So yeah, if you guys want it, you can just text me like, oh, the notepad, could you give it to me? And I'll send it to you on WhatsApp or something. But yeah. Anyway, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It was created in 1990 by a guy called Tim Berners-Lee. As far as the history of HTML goes, I think that is all that matters, at least to me. I'm not very big on history of HTML. I don't think it is particularly important. They've been over time. I think there have been variations of HTML. Like we've had XHTML. I think that was what I learned back then. Yeah. But yeah, HTML5 is what we're talking about today. That's what's relevant to me, and that's what I'm going to be learning. Anyway, it was created in It was created in 1990. Ooh, that's a fancy tool. Anyway, let's delete this. Was created in 1990 by a guy called Tim Berners-Lee. I hope I got his name correct. I really hope I did not butcher it. Anyway. Ooh, nice. So yeah. This guy. Okay, so that's how we created your one. Yeah, I'm still not used to this application at all. You know, I should zoom in more, just for the sake of some of you who might not be able to see clearly. Yeah, I think that's clear enough. Anyway, so to properly understand what hypertext markup language is or what HTML is, we need to understand what hypertext means and what markup means. So hypertext essentially refers to text that allows you to navigate between different documents. It is more like a text that contains links to other documents or text. That is what hypertext is. And then markup essentially refers to a language that we use to structure organized text that is displayed using like special codes. I think that's what I'll call it. It is like in HTML we use tags as those special codes, right? And without those tags existing, what you have is just like a chunk of text just lumped together on the web page. But then by the time you add tags to that lump of text, you start to give that text document or the content, you start to give it some shape, some structure. So that's what markup is. So a markup language essentially is a way to write a document using special codes that tell the computer how to display or organize or structure text. That's what markup language is. And examples of markup languages that we have would be HTML, XML, and Markdown. So Markdown is, some of you know Markdown, like your README. I think, is it your README? I think your README on GitHub is a Markdown. Yeah, I think it is. But yeah, so for the sake of taking notes, hypertext refers to text and links to other text, I guess. Other text / documents. So yeah, that is what it is. And the markup language refers to a language used special codes. So yeah, and that's what the markup language is. And examples of a markup language would be XML.
Sorry, I don't know that.
My Alexa is talking in the background, which is weird. HTML, Markdown. That's also funny. Like Markdown is an example of markup. Anyway, so, and then that brings us to the real question. If, let's put a full stop here. That just bugs me. Yeah. So if hypertext refers to a text that links to other text / documents, a markup language refers to a language used to structure organized text using special codes, which is that's a very simplistic definition of both of those things. Then what is HTML? So HTML essentially is a language that uses elements to specify the structure of a web page, or you could call it a language that tells the browser how to structure web pages using elements. And the big question is, what is an element? Well, time for the handy tablet I got to come into use. So, an element looks like this. You know what? Let's type it out first, then I could just draw on it. You come on. Okay, so an element looks like this. This would be a paragraph. We'll say this is a test paragraph, right? So this is what an element is. Now, usually when a lot of people are learning, they usually don't, or they can't distinguish between an element and a tag, and a lot of times you see them used interchangeably, but this is what they are, right? So the paragraph here, that sucks, is a tag, and this guy is also a tag. This guy here, why is it bending? Not sure, but let's see. This guy is the content, and all of these guys together is what we call an element. right? So that is what an element is. Now, we will call the guy with this guy here, right? Oh, that sucks. Erase. We need to erase this guy. Yeah. So we'll go back and call these guys opening tag, and this guy will be the closing tag. So that's what they are. So that's the opening tag, the closing tag, the content, and a combination of all those things make up an element, right? So, and you can also nest elements. You know what? Like, let's just go to like Visual Studio Code. I think that best explains all of this. So this is an element here, right? Ooh, autocomplete. This is a test element, right? So that's an element. What else? You could nest elements too, and you have multiple types of elements. Paragraph is one popular one, but there are a lot of them. Like if I did this is a test of nesting bold in a paragraph, I could do this. Yeah, I hate this part of autocorrect. Okay, and save it. I already have that web page open somewhere here, I guess. Refresh. Oh, you see, bold is in bold. This is a test that exists, and all of that. Right. So, yeah. So this is an element, and you can nest elements. Now, there are two types of elements, mainly, at least to the best of my understanding. So we have the normal ones, like the paragraph you're seeing, and then we have the void elements. So the void element is something like this, an image. Now, an image element doesn't. So a void. What makes a void element is that you cannot have a nested element in a void element, and you can have like a text content. So as you can see that the image element has no closing tag, it only just has an opening tag. Now, for those of us who learned how to write HTML way before now, we usually write it this way, right? So you add like that backslash, and then we'll call it like a self-closing tag. Apparently, you don't need to do that. It works regardless. So like it makes no difference, right? The self-closing tag was a feature in Hex HTML, which attempted to I may be wrong with this, but juxtapose HTML and XML together, and that right. So, but for HTML and in today's world where you write HTML, like you don't need to do that, right? So, and that's what a void element is. So a void element is essentially an element that you cannot nest another element in it, and it cannot have a text content. Now, that being said, the next part of learning about elements or HTML is learning what attributes are. So attributes essentially are, they contain extra information about the elements that you usually will not be able to display, because sometimes you can't display, like in the case of like a placeholder, right? So you can see it on the page. But so HTML elements have something called attributes, and for example, you could have like a class attributes here, and you could say display paragraph. It is particularly useful sometimes in like images where the best way to define, because like this we just have an image element, but no image is being displayed really. Like if I was to save this and I came back here and I refreshed, like you can't see a picture, right? But if I went to where can I get a new picture from? I don't know. Let's see. Mozilla's documentation might have something for us. Let's see. Could I find something here? That's a link. I need an image. I don't know. Yeah, okay. It's probably Firefox icon. Okay. So let's just use this guy. So we come here. So the image element has an attribute called source. And if I also give it that value, if I was to give the source attribute that value, came back here, index, refreshed, boom, I have an image. So yeah, anyway, that's what attributes are. You have it like a lot of attributes. The image element, for example, also has something called an alternate attribute, which essentially you won't see the text, but it helps you add extra information to the image, because sometimes somebody who is using your web page might not like, they might have accessibility issues, so they might be using like a screen reader or something, right? And if I was to say this is a Mozilla Firefox image, you know what, this is it, Firefox image, like Mozilla, right? I mean, just try to make it sensible, right? And we save this, and we came here, refreshed. Usually if you hover right, it should show you that text, but it isn't. But anyway, a screen reader will pick it up. Now I think I have a few questions because of the next section I'm going to, but I would just ask those questions in the next section. Anyway, so, and that is the element and all there is to it. That is it. It is a combination of tags and the content, except it is a void element, and usually elements have attributes that help give them extra information, right? Now, I just remember that you could also do things like, I could give this guy like a width. I could say, well, I want it to be 500 pixels wide and a height of 700 pixels. I'm probably going to mess this image up with this, but who cares? Yeah, aspect ratio out the window, but you get the gist of it, right? So we're going to delete that because I do not like how that image looks. Yeah. Anyway, so that's what an attribute is. Now, so far we've written a paragraph, we've added an image, but you just cannot continue chucking in elements into like the page without any proper structure. So HTML document, or an HTML document itself, has like a structure or something called an anatomy of an HTML document, and it is the way an HTML document is supposed to be structured. So let's just cut all of this because I'm going to paste it back, but it goes like this. So you have your doc type, the HTML. Now you might be like, oh, what is a doc type? Well, it used to be very relevant before, in the sense that we used to, they were meant as a set of rules, right? That the HTML page had to follow to be like considered good HTML. But now they're more like a historical artifact. It's something we just add so that your page works well. And that brings me to the question I have. Already we could display HTML in the browser. Why exactly do we need all of this? And I don't know the answer to that, so I'll be checking that in a moment. But let's go over like the anatomy of an HTML document. So the first thing you have is your doc type declaration, right? And like I said, it's simply a historical artifact that you just need for everything to work fine. The next thing you need is the HTML elements itself. What is that L? Yeah, that is it. So, and yeah, this element is a root element. It wraps every other thing up, right? So that's all there is to it. And then you have your head. Is it head? Yeah, I guess it's head. Yeah. So it's head. And the head is the container for all things that you want to add to the page, but they are not contents, right? So usually you'd see things like this. So you can see getting started with HTML. You know what? Let's just inspect. For it to go to the very top, come here. Title. There should be a title somewhere. Oh, I can't find a title anywhere. You should have a title. Oh yeah, this is a title here. Get started with HTML, learn web developments, MDN, right? And that's what's here, right? So I mean, it is something that is added to the page, but it isn't exactly on the page itself. Like it isn't content. Also, for those of you who don't know, we could do this. We could say, instead of starting with HTML, now like learn web development. You know what? We're learning how to make Rasengans here. How to make a Rasengan. Getting started with Naruto. If I did this, oh look at that. Getting started with Naruto, learn how to make a Rasengan. And I butchered the spelling of how to. But yeah, you can always just tweak around. Like it's not going to ultimately change this, because the moment I refresh this page, everything goes back to normal. But yeah, so this is a very useful tool. Anyway, and as you can see, there are a lot of things in the head here. All of these they're like extra information about the web page that you can add into the content itself, right? So that's what the head is. Now, you don't need to add all of this to yours, right? Like this is a very, what's the word? It is a huge page, right? So yeah, but as far as the fundamentals go, in the head, the next thing you need to add will be the title, which is what we played around. And for us, this is a beginner's guide to making web pages. Ooh, I feel really smart coming up with that. Like, wow. Yeah. So, and if I was to refresh and we went to this guy, see, now we don't see index there anymore. We just see, oh, what is wrong with me and mixing the letters up? Making. Right? So you can see that our title has changed. Right? So, and that, I mean, the title is self-explanatory. It just sets the title of the page. And then there's also something else here. So there is the meta tag. And the meta tag is a void tag. Now, out of habit, I will always do this. Like I would add that self-closing slash because it's just something I always do. But again, it is not a needed thing. And for here, we're just setting the character set. UTF-8 is like a general one. So, and that is what we'll be going with. Now, what is UTF-8? How do I describe this? It is UTF-8 is the encoding for, what will I call it? Well, I see. I mean, yeah, it is the universal character set. Like it includes pretty much every language from any, like every character from any human language that exists, right? You could change this. Like you could change this to something that is more, like you have like ISO 885 9 something, right? But UTF-8 is what we use generally speaking. Like depending on your use case, you can always change it. But to be safe, like UTF-8 is like the character sets to use. Maybe I would do like another video just learning about all the multiple character sets and we could use. But yeah, and then after the title and the head, what we have next is the body. And in this guy is where all the content goes. So yeah, the content does this work here? Nope, it doesn't. We need to properly format these guys. Just copy all of them, tab, boom. Right, and that is the anatomy of a HTML document. You have the doc type, you have your HTML elements, and in your HTML elements you have the header elements, and the header elements contains meta and title, and essentially it contains all the extra information about your page that are not contents but they are relevant to the page itself. And then you have the body, which contains content itself. Now, as you can see, prime examples of everything we'll be saying so far. These guys are not self-closing tags. right? So the head is not self-closing, and as you can see, we can nest more elements. We can nest more elements in it. Same with the body. So we have a body element, and we nested a paragraph element in it. And for the meta element, which is a void element, you can see that it has no text content. It just has an attribute, and that's about it. So yeah, that is what the anatomy of an HTML document is. Now the question I had was, I mean, we saw that I could put content and write elements in the HTML file, right? And it would display. And I didn't need to do all of that, so I just did. And so the big question I had is, well, why does that work? So let's see. Why can I how do I write this? Why does the HTML render even though I did not add a body element? Yeah, so why does content outside the body still display? Well, that's a very interesting answer. What? Show me something interesting. Let's see. So it says create down from your code. I think the answer to this might be more complicated. I might have to like sit down and actually just look at it. But you know what? Like we don't have forever for this video, so I will just add that to the next video on forms and stuff. So points taken. But let's just go back to what we're doing. So what next? We've talked about the anatomy of a web page. And I think that's basically covered, except for the question I had. Okay, you know what? Let's talk about what goes on in the head. So in this part, right? So the two things I've showed so far is title and the meta elements, but you could have a whole lot more here. Like as you saw with Mozilla, like I would say, oh, you know what? I want the whole world to know that I am the author of this web page. So I could say, give me a new meta tag, have a name, call it author, and I think it's description, if I'm not wrong. Content. It is content. Yeah, I have it notes here to help me out just in case. The content is, my name is sacred text. Boom. So yeah, and that just gives more information to this web page. We could also add other things like CSS. So CSS is usually added here too, and instead of meta, it uses a link. It is also a void element. So and it is usually added like this. So you use the source attribute. Is it source? No, if I remember correctly, it's href. Yeah, because it's a link. So and you just tell it where your CSS file is, like index.css, right? And I think you have to add something called, yeah, it just bugs me if it doesn't come first. And you call it style sheet, I guess. Style sheet. Yes. So and if I had an index or CSS file somewhere here, that link will be there. We'll cover like linking your HTML to CSS file once we start talking about CSS, but you could also do like JavaScript. I think JavaScript is done using a script. It is also, no, JavaScript is not a void element. So it is, yeah, so script isn't, and you use source for that. So we could also just say index.js, and we could give it I think defer. Yeah, defer is the name of the attribute, which essentially says, oh, load all the HTML first before you start running JavaScript. That's what that guy does. There's also link for like an icon. So I think that is, if I did this, if I said this is an icon and I gave it a href, yeah, let's use this Mozilla icon. Let's see if it will work. Boom. Save. Let's go back to our page. See, so you can see that the logo up here has changed to Mozilla's, right? Yeah, so that's because of that icon link that we added. So you can see how already, like, these are very tiny details that you would notice and you are just fine with, but they are not part of the real content of the page, but they are sort of relevant to the overall experience that people have. So yeah, and I think that is what is in the header document. I think you could also add like a general language. So I could say, oh, I want my web page to be rendered in English. I come here and go like, oh, everything here is English. Let's see, US, for example, and that is that, right? But yeah, so, and looking at this is what, in my opinion at least, right, with the exception of this guy here, right, but every other thing here is what a standard HTML page will need or will require, as far as the header goes and as far as the overall anatomy of it goes. Usually, yeah, you'd have to use like an icon of your own making or something here, but you catch the gist of it. So, and this is what it looks like. Now that has been done, let's go over actual content, right? So like HTML, most of the things you'll put in it will be text, I guess. So let's talk about formatting text in HTML. Some of the key things in HTML, or like the key elements in HTML, at least from experience, is the paragraph and header elements, right? So we already have paragraphs here, but we also have our header elements, and we have them from H1 to H6. Let's do 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's all of it. So this guy is 2. Oh, why is it not changing? It's 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. Yeah, this is taking so long. 5, 6, 6. So yeah, and we could just see header 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, and that has been saved. Refresh, right, and you can see like they are very different, right? So paragraphs and headers are like the spine of formatting text on HTML. Now there's something called semantic HTML, right? And you have semantic HTMLs in the sense of like structuring your page and in the sense of text formatting your page. So your what will I call it? Your header is Your headers are semantic, right? So anyway, there are a few rules regarding formatting content on your page, right? There is a structural hierarchy, especially with headers, right? So for example, it is advised or preferred that you have only one H1 element. Because think of it this way: if you are taking a note or you are writing an essay or like or something like that, right? You have one main header, right? Which is like the title of whatever you are doing. And then you have subheaders following it, right? So the moment you have just one H1 element, usually it's at the very top of your document, you shouldn't have more than one. So you shouldn't have multiple H1s appearing everywhere on your page, right? And you don't use them simply because I could achieve this. I could have a text look exactly like this by styling it. So like using CSS to give it like a font size and making it bold and deciding what the font type is, right? So we the reason we use headers isn't just because of the style, the innate style that they hold, but it's also a semantic thing in the sense that if a screen reader was going through this, the screen reader can tell that, oh, that is the topic or the header itself, and these are subheaders, and that is a subheader. Let's just put it that way, right? So it also makes it easier to read, right? So somebody looking at the page can immediately tell that, oh, that's the header, and that is a subheader, and that's a subheader. And as long as you adhere to that kind of uniformity, right, these things are easy to pick. I think as far as SEO goes, which is search engine optimization, right, they also pick up on headers on your page. So it is good to structure those headers properly, right? There are a few things you also shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be nesting headers in a paragraph, for example, right? I mean, it sounds absurd, but who knows? Like I have seen it mentioned enough for me to assume or guess that it is particularly, people have done it maybe. But yeah, you shouldn't be nesting headers in. You shouldn't be nesting paragraphs in headers. I shouldn't even be nesting paragraphs. Yeah, you shouldn't be blah, blah, blah. You should not be nesting headers in paragraphs, and you should not be nesting paragraphs in headers. Either way, like you shouldn't be doing stuff like that. So yeah, headers are a perfect example of semantic HTML. Another example of semantic HTML we have, as far as content goes, are lists. So we also have lists. So we have two major types. There is the unordered and there is the ordered list. So this is an ordered list, and you have list items. So I could say item 1, I'm not particularly good with keyboard shortcuts. So, and then we have item 2, item 3, item 4. And if I did this, came here, refreshed, you can see. Now, you should, and then you have an unordered list too. So an unordered list is essentially the same as this guy, except instead of a UL, instead of an OL, you have a UL. So it is unordered list, right? And this is what it looks like. So you can see that it uses bullet points as opposed to like numerical ordering. And both of these are semantic in the sense that if I wanted you to know that, let's say I was giving you like a recipe, right? Well, the first thing you do is you boil water, and the next thing you do is wash your rice, and the next thing you do is add the rice to the boiling water, and the next thing you do is add salt. And you had to follow those steps in the order in which I want you to do it, right? Then I will use another list. I will use an ordered list. If it did not particularly matter what order you did things, then an unordered list is fine, right? So that is another HTML element you have to keep an eye out for. Then another one would be the emphasis and I think the bold. Now, these are very interesting elements because when I was learning at first, right? So let's say we have, so here we have bold, right? You can see that we have bold. Now, bold here is not semantic, and it's not semantic for one simple reason. You know what? Let's do this. so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll also add for emphasis and italics. So then there is strong. So you have strong. Let's change this guy to strong too. Right? Now, if I was to come here, let's go back to our page. Well, the real question is, what's the difference? Both of them are emphasized, right? Like, I see them and they are bold text. Well, the big difference is, in the case of bold, the B tag, it is not semantic because we simply use it to I just need the text to be bold. I need you to just notice it, right? So I could be writing an essay, or like, let's go to Wikipedia. Let's do like let's see if we can do this. Right. So Elements is a global testing inspections, whatever that is, right? Company type, industry, like you see all these guys here, right? When you are reading this text to somebody else, you don't need to emphasize that Elements is in bold, right? It isn't particularly important in the context of the text you are seeing, right? They just want you to always have your, like when you're reading it with your eyes, right? Like Elements can catch your eye all the time. But it isn't like if a screen reader was reading this, it wouldn't go Element. Is it like it would just go Elements, a global testing, inspection and certification company headquartered in London, because it isn't. I'm trying to think of the right way to describe this. It isn't. It is used to bring attention using the bold tag, right? But it is just used to do that. It doesn't mean it is significant, right? As opposed to the strong. So the strong text is saying this is a significant piece of text, right? Like, take note of it. It is important, right? It is used to give text significance. So it isn't just making it bold for the sake of having a bold text, but it is the boldness is simply a side effect. We are essentially emphasizing that significance. That is why we use the strong elements. Now, the same is similar for emphasis and italics. So, and that one is easier to explain. So there is this guy, and then there is emphasis. And if I came here and refreshed, you can see that both of them are also italicized. Now, the big difference between both of them is for just italics, is like if you're reading a text, right, sometimes, and you saw a Latin word, you'll see that it was italicized. It doesn't mean that we're emphasizing any stress on that word. That's just how we write Latin words. Now, I could be reading an essay or a text or something and see a word italicized, and I know that, oh, the person is trying to emphasize the stress on that word. So let's say something like, if I said, well, that is true, and I said, well, that is true, right? Now, if I was to put those two things into writing, one of those wells will be italicized to show that, I said it well under stress. Like it is very different from just well, and like this is making things more about English or language, but you get the point of it, because things like screen readers and other tools for accessibility for people who might not be able to just see the words on the screen, right? They take all of these things into account. So, and that's why it is relevant to be able to distinguish between bold and strong, italics and emphasis, and when to use them and how to use them. So yeah, and then other examples of like relevant elements that we might need as far as content, as far as structuring content goes, is you have the div, but the div is not a semantic element. It is how we group elements together, or a group of elements together can be grouped using a div, but it is not semantic at all. It is, because sometimes a lot of people, sometimes when they are talking about, and I found out while I was learning all of this, is they talk about the semantics like everything will fit into all those boxes, but the truth is it doesn't. A lot of people use divs to structure their web pages without caring about the semantics. As far as semantics go for structuring content on the web page itself, you have elements like main, so everything in the main body would go here, right? And when anybody or a screen reader is reading it, it will go, oh, that's like the main content. And then ideally you have like the header, right? And they say you shouldn't put the header in the nav as a best practice, because a screen reader cannot, like, it is easier for a screen reader to pick them aside. But you see people do things like this. So which is, they're saying, oh, I have a header, and then in the header I have like a navigation, right? You could also just put it outside. And then outside of the main body, you see people put a footer, right? And in the main body, there are all sorts of like section elements that are used to structure your web page, like an article, and then you have a section too, right? So all these guys are semantic HTML. I will show you like an example of how they are being used. Other examples of semantic HTML are things like we have a description list. So a description list is essentially, let's say I have like a word, and then that word has a description or a definition. So if this was it, and this is how it is written, it's a DL instead of an OL. And then usually it has like the title, so a DT, and we'll say Merlin, and then it will have a description. So let's delete this. Let's have a DD, and we'll say a great mage, I guess. And if I to store save that and refresh, you can see Merlin, a grey mage. So that's what a descriptive list is. And then you have things like block quotes, you have inline quotations, you have sites. Like there's a lot of semantic HTML. So if you are particularly interested in all of them, you could just go to the Mozilla page and find them. But essentially, their semantic HTML elements are they add, you're not using them just for the sake of using them. They add meaning to the very structure of your page. Like, oh, a bold is different from a strong, an italic is different from an emphasized text. A main element is different from just a div, right? And the benefits of them is accessibility, search engine optimization, and human readability. Somebody who is reading your code itself can easily distinguish these things. So we could come here and say, let's search for semantic HTML. So header, main, and footer tags are semantic because they are used to represent different sections on the HTML page. They are more descriptive than div tags, and that's the key thing about semantic elements, that they are way more descriptive. I'm trying to document and website structure. Let's see. So for example, this would be a navigation. So where home, our team, projects, and contacts is, that would be like a navigation. there should be HTML somewhere here. Sorry. Oh yeah, so as you can see, he has a header, right? And the header is the main text. There's a h1, which is a header, and you can see that is this guy here. And then after that, he has the navigation and the nav all the way here, right? And that is this guy here. But then he has the main, where all the page's main content goes. And then it contains an article. So an article is here. You have h2, which as you can see, you didn't use a h1 here because we already have a h1 saying header here, right? So, and then text, and then there is a subsection to the article. So the article itself has a subsection, right? And another subsection. And as you can see, because this is a subsection and a subsection, it's not like it did h3, h4. It's like they stayed consistent with how they are going about doing all of this. And then you have an article, the closing tag of the article, and then you have an aside, right? So an aside is usually like content that's related to the main content, and then you have a footer and the end of the body. So let's copy this and paste, just in case you guys want it. I could always share it with you. Right, so yeah, and that is essentially HTML and semantic HTML. That is all of it. I don't know, I probably should do like a different video on semantic HTML, but I think you guys caught the gist of it. And if you did not, right, just like reach out to me, and we'll just talk about it, right? So yeah, that's about it for HTML and semantic HTML. I would do like maybe tomorrow a new video on like forms and validations and accessibility, because accessibility goes beyond just screen readers and all of that. So yeah, well, thank you very much. See you in the next video. I am off to watch anime, I guess.